Why is Skyward Sword important to Breath of the Wild 2? Today we will discuss why Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild 2 are closely tied, and why you should play Skyward Sword if you haven't already. Hey Hylians, this is Naydinfar, your Hyrule Historian, here to explain the lore and theories of the Legend of Zelda Series. This is the first of many installments as we dive deep into the mysteries, timelines, history, lore, and symbolism throughout Hyrule and other lands within the series. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notifications bell for more Zelda-themed content. There has been a theory that Breath of the Wild 2 could be part of a trilogy. Hidemaru Fujibayashi, the writer and director of Skyward Sword, continues on to direct Breath of the Wild, which came directly on the heels of Skyward Sword. And he has stated in interviews he had so many ideas he couldn't fit them into Breath of the Wild alone. Some of the Breath of the Wild concept art includes alien invasions, an assortment of divine beasts, small houses with tiny villagers. Those that seem to have carried over to Breath of the Wild 2 include floating land like the outcroppings Hylia lifted to the sky in Skyward Sword, and Link's arm mechanic as seen in the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer. As Fujibayashi continues his role as director, will his vision continue in Breath of the Wild 2? If so, then Skyward Sword is not only the origin story of the hero, the blood of the goddess, and the Curse of Demise, it is the origin of his creative vision, which may be why it was pushed so hard by Nintendo. They ported Skyward Sword as a standalone game, making zero mention of other titles that would also soon be coming to Switch, such as Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, nor the rumored ports of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. They didn't want any nostalgic or monetary competition from those beloved games. They also fixed the poorly received motion control mechanics, not only improving them, but adding button-only accessibility and removing barrier for play. The final push was the beautiful and highly coveted Skyward Sword Joy-Cons that released the same day. All of this screamed, please play this game, it's important. So what parts of Skyward Sword closely tie into Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2? Warning, spoilers ahead for Skyward Sword and for Breath of the Wild. Let's start with Hylia worship. The main goddess in Skyward Sword, Hylia, is also the main deity worshipped in Breath of the Wild. This can be seen by the numerous goddess statues scattered throughout Hyrule that match that of the giant Hylia statue from Skyloft. Long forgotten are the golden goddesses Nehru, Din, and Furore, and the Triforce associated with them. The only connection to them may be the three springs located around Hyrule and their guardian spirits, the dragons Naydra, Dinral, and Farosh. Skyward Sword lore states that the gods of old gave the power, the Triforce, to the goddess Hylia, to prevent this great power from falling into the hands of evil swarming the lands. Hylia hid the Triforce and the people on a crop of land she sent to the sky. Unable to use the Triforce in her goddess form, she was reborn as a human, as Zelda. This started the bloodline of the goddess. And while Zelda from Breath of the Wild discusses the power within her passed down in her blood, aka goddess blood, she doesn't ever talk about the Triforce, even when we can clearly see it on her hand, as if its lore has been forgotten. There's also the probability that this is the representation of the Triforce, not the actual Triforce itself. And probably why she had so much trouble obtaining her powers to begin with. Why is this significant? Because Demise's reincarnation as Ganondorf was never fully destroyed in Breath of the Wild, only his Malice form, Calamity Ganon, leaking from his open wounds as we see in the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer. Zelda had the power, but used it on the wrong source, and at the end of Breath of the Wild, she states, the power is gone again. This may lead us on another adventure of locating the Triforce to fight Ganondorf's true form. It appears he was being kept in a state of alive, yet incapacitated. Why wouldn't they just destroy him? Maybe because then it would start the cycle of reincarnation Demise promised from Skyward Sword, and soon would be reborn yet again in another form. Keeping Ganondorf in this state prevented that reincarnation. Whoever placed the seal we see in the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, whether a descendant of Hylia or some mysterious Zonai magic, must have felt this was the best strategy to keep peace in Hyrule. And it worked for thousands of years. They didn't realize the power of Malice leaking from his body or the potential help he might receive to revive him. Like Girahim helped revive Demise in Skyward Sword, could we see a full revival of Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild 2, and will the blood of the goddess power be instrumental in this resurrection? And whose blood? Zelda's? Or did they already acquire it from her mother, who died when Zelda was young? Is that why the calamity broke free and overwhelmed Hyrule? We know from Breath of the Wild that Ganon could use the Sheikah tech against us if he infected it with his malice. He is indeed cunning and plotting even in his current state, all to regain power to his true form. It also appears he has been watching us this whole time through his malice eyes. Malice is another tie to Skyward Sword and was found below the ancient cistern, as well as possessing the evil beings that dwelled there and around Hyrule. They would also drop powerful malice crystals upon their destruction. Another detail we see is the voice in the sword speaking to Zelda in Breath of the Wild. We know that voice to be Fi from Skyward Sword, the being the goddess Hylia tasked with helping the hero on his journey. Fi told us we would meet again in another life. All of these themes of goddess blood, the loss of power of the Triforce, malice infecting the land, seem to point towards Skyward Sword as the main creative source. And then we see the return to the sky to seal the deal. This one section of the trailer shows the free fall into Hyrule, reminiscent of the fall in Skyward Sword. But where or how high up are we falling from? Does Skyloft still exist above the clouds? Will we see Loftwings alive again, and not just as the crest of the royal family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Skyward Sword is important to the upcoming Breath of the Wild 2? Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe for more of my takes on the lore and theories of the Legend of Zelda series.